truly amazing to have you. We have a huge audience online, by the way, who saw you in Abu Dhabi when you were just there for the Grand Prix, who were also from Saudi and in other parts of the Arab world, who I know are big fans, and everybody's very excited to see you. But we would love, Reema, first of all, to get a bit of an insight into how you became a race car driver in the first place, because that wasn't the path that you were set on to begin.
Exactly. First of all, thank you for having me. It's great to be here, and it's amazing how connected we are, having 20,000, guests here and elsewhere. So it's honestly a pleasure. And what a 2 weeks we've had in the racing world. First of all, I'm still getting over it myself, but it's been super exciting. My journey into racing was quite unconventional. I was, like you said, I worked in finance for a few years and then found myself in between jobs. And at the time I was back home in Saudi. And I had this itching passion for cars and eventually turned into motorsport, which was like everyone as a viewer, just on TV. And coming back home, having had done, let's say, I graduated college, I had some work experience, I felt like I needed to do something for myself. And I decided, why not start understanding more about racing, learning it for myself. And it just started as educating myself. And then visiting a track, getting in a car for the first time, which is probably one of the best memories and why I'm here today. Just that feeling behind the wheel on the track for me was the answer that I wanted to do this, maybe just on a personal level, but I wanted to explore this, and this is kind of my happy place. So it started off just as basic as being in a car on track. And then from one thing to the next, taking smaller steps into meeting the right people, putting myself out there in the racing world, which I knew nothing about. I discovered that there's a lot more to it. And I signed up to my first race, like you said, in October of 2018, which happened to be the same year women were driving in Saudi. And I went into that purely for my own passion, my drive. I had this dream that I wanted to do for like probably 5-6 years, or even maybe more. I would say maybe 6 years. And then doing it and being on track, realizing my dream was such an amazing experience. But then after that, coming out of the race, people coming up to me being like, wow, how does it feel to be, a Saudi racing? I didn't, believe it or not, I didn't come to that conclusion. I was just doing it out of passion. And to be recognized then, the pride I felt from Saudis and all the support I got from everyone else is why I really took this on, full time and on a professional level, because I felt like it was bigger than me. It wasn't just a passion, that it was now my responsibility to do this right. And I guess that's why I'm here today.
Talk to us about how that felt. Like you said, October 2018 was only 4 months after Saudi women could finally drive. And, having lived in Jeddah, I remember, like there was this yearning, and then it finally happens. How did that feel, in fact, seeing all of these things open up and then you being able to get into your passion and to make this, your full-time, not just passion, but your job, your career, your, life sport. How did that feel going into that like that?
It was, again, such a humbling experience, but I think going into it, I've, again, had a passion for sports, had a passion for cars, so I started driving when I went abroad and studied abroad. And I knew growing up in Saudi, even before that, it was only going to be a matter of time when women were going to drive. So I just didn't think it would happen at that pace and at that rate. So when it was announced that, women will be driving, I think it was a year before they had announced it, I remember like celebrating. I probably was on the edge of tears, just the fact that it was happening. And I think everyone felt the same way, because it was a step into a whole new world, not just getting behind a car, but it just opened so many more possibilities for everyone. And then having come to Saudi, I moved to Saudi around that time, and moving from the passenger to the driver, it didn't feel foreign initially, because I got in the car and I knew my way around. But then, like, I remember like 10 minutes into my drive, I'm like, oh wait, I'm driving. You know, I realized that this is actually happening. And one of the funny occurrences that happened, or sweet occurrences, I saw another woman driving. And I just found myself waving at her. And I didn't know who she was. And my sister, who was with me in the car, she's like, why are you waving? Do you know her? I was like, no, I'm just very happy to see another woman on the road. So now it's very, I mean, completely different. I see so many more women on the road. And Saudi just blossoming as a, you know, community and a culture. And it's so nice to see that.
Yeah, yeah. It's something, you know, we were feeling and now the whole world gets to see, which is exciting. But talk to us about your experience representing your country internationally, you know, as Saudi Arabia's first F3 driver.
Yeah, so again, I think my how the racing world will look at me, or my coaches, or people that mentor me, they're like, remember, you're only 3 years old. You know, I've only started racing for 3 years. For them, a person, to put into perspective, a person that's racing in F3 is an 18-year-old, a 19-year-old. So they started from the ages of 8, maybe in a go-kart. They make their way up to Formula 4, and then will make their way up to Formula 3. And as you can see now in Formula One, there are drivers as young as 20 that are competing in that level. So for me to come in at the age that I was, and coming in and taking this, let's say, more difficult route, I knew that there were going to be challenges. I knew that it wasn't going to be easy putting myself in a new situation against peers that have loads more experience than I do, but were probably 10 years younger than me. So I threw myself into the deep end, if you like. And the first year of competing internationally, it was just about, you know, instead of like just trying to swim, you know, trying to learn how to swim, trying to understand all this whole new world. And I found that with the community that motorsport has and the encouragement they have for seeing a female in the sport, because that's also few and far between, unfortunately, there was encouragement from people that I didn't know, my competitors as well. But then as well, being a Saudi and coming from the Arab world, it was a surprise to many that, you know, that I was doing this. And then when they found out my age, that was another surprise. But I think that for me was a plus, and it was a nice way to introduce people to my culture and where I'm from, because you're around these people all year. They become like your second family. So it was a very, I mean, it was amazing to experience something like this internationally in the world of motorsport, I think, which is the UK. But it was even more special racing at home and being around familiar people, my family, friends, and also just other Arabs. There's a completely different feeling, you know, racing on home soil.
What does it take to be a race car driver? What does your routine look like, your training routine? What does that take?
Yeah, so it's a lot of the things that actually it entails, a lot of people don't expect. But there's obviously a season, what happens in season, what happens off season. So we're currently off season. So this would be most of the physical building that I would do, all the training I do for the season, because when the season starts, you're pretty busy traveling, moving from track to track. So you're building your base, if you like. And that is mostly strength and endurance. So as a racing driver, or in particular what I do, which is Formula 3 or had done, it requires a lot of physical force to turn the car, to withstand the G-forces in the car. And one of the main things that you have to get your head around is the weight of your head. And essentially your neck has to be quite strong. A human head, I think, weighs 5 kilos. And then a helmet, in addition to that, another 2. So it's, let's say, 7. But then the G-force comes in, so you're carrying an extra, whatever that resistance is, the force. So it's either double that in my car. So you have to carry that weight in the car. So you're essentially having to train your trunk to do that. So it's a lot of neck training, a lot of chest, wrist training that I end up doing in the gym. But sometimes it's also fun things like mountain climbing that actually end up helping with your grip strength and with things that you'll need in the car. And not just the strength side, but the physical side of things. You're operating at like 100%, 90% of your, let's say, capacity. So you need to be focused. You need to be able to be super alert. In order to do that, you need to be fit. So we found that endurance training, so like long runs, cycling, things like that, help create that fitness that ends up giving you the clarity and the focus and the attention you need in the car when you're under pressure, when you're in new circumstances. It provides that environment to be replicated in the car. So that's just what happens off season. But then in season, it's a lot of on-track training, a lot of simulator training, and then a lot of prep behind the scenes. Like over a weekend, we're probably in the car. We're on track, on site for 4 days. But out of the 4 days, maybe a total time of 3 hours in the car. So that's, to put it in perspective, that's very little. So it's, you come to track, you operate for 30 minutes, and then you're off again. And then it's the same thing. So it's a lot about managing that. And taught me so much as a person. I think sport does that, but in racing in particular, the pressure that you're under, the level of intensity, the highs and lows of the sport, I think it's made me actually a lot calmer person, not the opposite. I think I had this tendency to kind of react and jump the gun, if you like, or maybe even have a bit of a temper. In racing, if you do that, you're going to be caught out in the car, or you'll make a mistake because you're not focused, or because your attention is taken elsewhere. So I think if anything, it slowed me down off track, but on track, I'm probably faster. Yeah.
Like you said, that's totally unexpected. You don't think about all of the things that happen while you're driving and racing. We just think you just sit there and you just drive a car, but there's so much more to it than that. And the fitness that you need to be able to perform at your best. That's so incredibly interesting. Talk to us about the most unforgettable race that you've competed in.
Unforgettable was probably my first win, which was 3 months after I started. It was a bit of an unconventional way of winning, because we had it wasn't a straight start to finish. We had a stop in the middle of the race. And in that stop, I essentially went from 5th to 1st, or 4th to 1st. So I didn't really see what was going on. I didn't realize that I was first until probably the last lap of the race. My team couldn't communicate with me at the time. So it was, I finished the race and I was like, oh my God, like, did I just win the race? Which was a very nice way to experience your first one, because it was a shock, and I wasn't under that much pressure knowing that I was first. But that was unforgettable. And that happened here in Abu Dhabi.
Amazing, amazing. And of course, you were just here for the Abu Dhabi F1.
Yeah.
What does that feel like when you're watching, the racers and the drivers? Talk us through your emotions there.
This one was very different because it was a title contender. So it was, both drivers came in wanting to win the championship, and they were tied in points. So that, as a spectator and also a racing driver, you know how much pressure there is there for them to perform. The race was very exciting. I lost my voice as well. But it was, as a spectator, as a driver, you want to be in the car. Obviously, I'm not at a Formula One level or even close to that, but you makes you miss kind of just doing what you love and your passion. But then you realize, like, at this level and the stage that they're in, there's so much technicality that happens. There's only one driver in the car, but the team is like hundreds. The team has quite a few people working on strategy, working on performance, working on so many things. So it's exciting as a spectator, because I get to enjoy all of these things, watch them, understand what's happening, and not just kind of have a one-track mind of racing and just making sure I get to the finish line ahead of the rest of the cars. But it was I think contentious ending to the title. But I think everyone's going to remember it for sure. For sure.
But, you just highlighted something. We forget how much of a team sport it actually, in fact, is. But, let's talk about, sporting events, and the way that the pandemic really impacted sporting events, the organization of them. So many were cancelled. Talk to us about the impact that travel restrictions and subsequent protocols have had on the careers of young motorsport contenders and sports people.
Yeah, so it was, especially for international events or events that had quite a big range of international competitors, a lot of the competitors had to, pull out of the events, and unfortunately with that, it means you lose your sponsorship. It means that you have to stop for a whole year, which as an athlete or any athlete, not just in motorsport, not having a competition or not having something to work to takes away from the consistency that we need or the goals that we set. So I think one of the negative things was, of course, being out of a seat or not having an event to compete in. But on the other side, it actually taught us how to be a bit more adaptable, a bit more resilient, how to, kind of adapt with the times and changes, because generally we work to a very rigid schedule, a program. We know we have these races, so our calendar is set from the year before, whereas coming into that, there was a lot of uncertainty, and I know my own championship was pushed a few months. So I was all about, how am I going to get there? Am I going to be able to, race? And then eventually, when I did get there, we were fortunate enough to compete that in the pandemic. But what happens is you become so removed from everyone around you because of, the isolation. Because I remember I was probably one of the few cars on the road because I was able to go to these events, but alone. So you have no spectators, no, let's say, essential personnel only. So that removed from a lot of the support that you did get on track for me. And I can't imagine how it was for like the Olympians or, other people who were working for 4 years for this goal, So I think particularly my experience was a little bit, not easy, but I was able to adapt to it a little bit. But that was only because of the support that I had, and thankfully everyone, believed in my journey and helped me through it. But it was definitely a tough year, but I think there was a lot of positives that came out of it as well.
Yeah. There are so many who are still rooting for you, and many who are online right now and sending in their questions. I've got one from Noura from Jeddah. She is asking, who are your idols in the sport, and what have you learned from them?
Oh, I like this question. Thank you, Noura. So I think as a latecomer to the sport, or maybe I'm also someone who doesn't have many idols, I kind of go through people, like actual people that I meet, and what the impressions that they leave behind and things that I've learned from them. I admire, let's say, drivers like Ayrton Senna, Jim Clark, who are historic in the sport and have, proved time and time again how much it takes and how much sacrifice it requires to win a world championship. But Lewis Hamilton, I think by far everyone can agree, is one of the all-time greats, maybe the all-time great. And just everything he went through in his career, and that's definitely something that is mind-blowing for me. I can't even fathom how they've actually achieved these things. But I'd say someone who really played a big role in my career just because of a pure meeting, and I think this is something we should touch on as well, is how there's a bit of a gap from getting to where you want to be to where you want to go. And having that connection and personal experience with someone or meeting someone makes all the difference. And for me, one of that was meeting Susie Wolf. It was a time where I was making a decision in my life whether I needed to, it was a career in politics, not politics, I studied politics, but a career in finance, and had this itching desire to get in a car. And meeting her, I talked to her about, my passion and what I really, care about, and just the encouragement I got from her, someone who is, well experienced in the sport, that has, foresight, and you're just forming a real connection with a person, really pushed me to kind of go out there and get my racing license. And that's all it took, just a meeting. So I think that for me is answered the question a bit long, but that would be the...
Not at all. No, I love that. You're so right. There are critical moments and people that you meet that will propel you, in the direction that you really needed to go in to give you that support. And speaking, to that support, how can we encourage more young women to go into this area if this is their passion, to go into sports, particularly when we're talking about conservative cultures like Arab culture, like Asian cultures as well?
Yeah. I think this is definitely an important thing to touch on, because for me, one of the biggest thing that stood in my way was actually myself. I realize now, only after, experiencing it, is initially it was educating myself, understanding, not just being like, oh, I want to get there, but I don't know how. I had to, go out, explore, do my research. I asked, another thing is asking questions, putting yourself out there, networking, meeting like-minded people, learning from their experiences. Those are things I think that you can give this advice to anyone who's wanting to explore a new area or a new opportunity. But I think in particular with our region and the things that we face that maybe other cultures don't, is the support that you get from, from home, from your community. I think that's very important. I think without my family's support and belief in me, I wouldn't have been able to do this. And I think that's something that needs to be highlighted, that everyone should have an equal chance in terms of opportunity. If you're going to send your son to football camp, send your daughter to football camp if she wants to go as well, or same thing with something else. And I think that in motorsport is something that cars are generally not associated with girls. So if you give that opportunity to both, then you see maybe she ends up being more talented than your son, or the other way around. But it's about promoting that from at home, and also the community as a whole, like just having that support. And I'd say that would be a crucial part.
It's so important to have that support from family and to really have the belief, like you said, in yourself as well. But what about the industry itself? What about leaders within the motorsports industry? What can they do? What should they be doing to bring more women in to compete as well at these highest levels?
I think, again, I would say education. Education is a very important and integral tool to giving this or showing this, to making this a possibility for young girls and women. But as well as education, I think the biggest thing is opportunity. As female in the sport, or females, I would say females in particular, it's about encouraging them to promote them either through scholarships or internships, and having that actual experience in order for them to assess whether it's something they want to do or not. But also, I think in particular for women and underprivileged communities, it's giving them that space as well, like whether it's in terms of infrastructure or in terms of having events locally, internationally. I wouldn't have been able to compete in Saudi if there wasn't a race for me to compete in. So same thing with any other sport or sports in general. Like, you need to have that infrastructure and have these events to promote them, or maybe for people to even think, oh, actually, I want to join that event. Oh, I need to train for this way. I need to, and then that would actually, this way will actually promote gyms, maybe even other training facilities, to build that base for what we need in our sport and sport in general, really.
You tapped into something really important, is to have that, provide those events, have that infrastructure as well. Because I think there's a hunger that, there needs to be access, like you're saying, for that to actually happen. A question that's related to this is from Khalid in Dubai. Thank you, Khalid, for the question. What was your experience being the ambassador at the inaugural Jeddah F1 Grand Prix?
It was a dream. It was a dream. I think for me,
your hometown.
Yeah, it was my hometown. One of the integral parts of the circuit was like this masjid or mosque at the end of the track. And I remember walking past this mosque several times, as a child. So it was very, very surreal to see something that was so close to me in terms of my racing and my passion, but also, the familiarity of the setting that it was in. And to be able to represent my country and myself as a racing driver at such an international event was a humbling experience, to say the least. But I think my hope in the end is that if I'm able to share my journey and share my experience, I can encourage other people to do the same, whether it's in racing or, any other field. It's doing what I can't be doing this alone, and I wouldn't be here if I didn't have the support or role models to look at. So I think for me that connection is important, and I hope that I can inspire others to do the same.
Yeah, you're already inspiring others to do the same for sure. But so what's your advice? You know, because not just women are looking up to you, you know, there are men who are watching you as well and incredibly proud of you and what you're doing. So what is your advice to young women who maybe want to look at going into racing or into other fields that, you know, they weren't sure if they could do it? What's your advice to them?
Yeah, I think also another so advice, I have a lot, but I'll narrow it down to something that a lot of people ask me, like they're like, we don't know what our passion is. Or they know what their passion is, but they don't know how to go about doing it. And I think, first of all, you need to go out there, try new things. You need to put yourself in new situations, challenge yourself. I wouldn't, if I had this dream and I continued to be a spectator and never went on track, I'd never be here today. So it's really just about believing and going after it, as simple as, like for me, showing up to a track, for, let's say, someone who's interested in photography or just start taking photos. There needs to start somewhere. And then I think from that is, you need to start somewhere. It will be challenging, and just be ready to be up for the challenge. And it is going to take hard work. It's going to take dedication, sacrifice. But if you're truly passionate about it and you love it, then that won't be an issue. But expect there to be a mountain to climb. And I think for me, that's probably one of the exciting things. You know, I'm always learning new things. I'm always growing. I'm always like, okay, there's a new challenge ahead. And I think everyone should feel that in whatever way they can, whether it's in a sport or a passion or, I think there's a lot of opportunity. You just have to go out and find it.
Yeah, find your mountain and climb it.
Yeah.
I think that's definitely the message. But Reema, what an incredible pleasure it is to have you, and we're right behind you. We are following your journey. We could not be more proud or more excited. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking Reema Juffali.